Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Welcome to AVPN's first South Asia Impact Capital Festival. I am Roshni Prakash, Products Director for Knowledge and Insights at AVPN. I am delighted to be your host for this session. For those of you who do not know AVPN, we are a network of funders and resource providers with over 600 members across 32 markets. Our mission is to move more capital towards impact in Asia by providing social investors like yourselves opportunities to connect with key stakeholders across various sectors and markets, to learn from one another and to find opportunities for action. Throughout this month, the festival will spotlight best practices and solutions that AVPN members are delivering across India, Bangladesh, Nepal, and Sri Lanka. They will address issues ranging from healthcare, livelihoods, climate action, and education, all of which are of particular urgency for the sub-region today. Highlights will be shared live on Twitter, so please share your experience with us by using the hashtags AVPN South Asia 2021 and Social Impact. A few housekeeping announcements before moving to the program. First, to download any session resources, please click on the download icon in the agenda page, which is beside the session title. Our partners have set up virtual booths with useful guides and resources. Please click on the Festival Partners tab to chat with the relevant partner representatives. To continue chatting with your fellow speakers and other delegates in the session, please make full use of the messaging function or the event feed in the platform. Finally, please note that this session will be recorded and you will be able to access the recordings for 3 weeks after the festival. The festival this week focuses on livelihoods. Despite its notable socioeconomic growth in the last decade, South Asia has not been spared the implications of the pandemic on jobs, financial security, and livelihood opportunities. It is now more critical than ever for stakeholders across the ecosystem to come together to address structural issues and the changing employment landscape so that the working population can respond effectively to the needs of the market. It is for this reason that AVPN puts the spotlight on livelihoods in the second week of the festival. Today, I will be speaking with Mr. Arun Kumar Pillai, Chief Strategy Officer at NSDC. He plays a key role in the new initiatives undertaken by NSDC and is responsible for the overall corporate strategy, as well as its engagements in funding, international collaborations, information technology, world skills, and advisory services. Mr. Pillai has over 24 years of work experience across various sectors, including 15 years in school and higher education, as well as skill development. He has worked with the government in formulation and implementation of the PPP policy and skill development. He has also held leadership roles in management consulting, education, skill development, and healthcare companies. He was a partner at Ernst & Young's government practice prior to his current role at NSDC. I'm very grateful to have you here, Mr. Pillai, especially since you have taken this on at the last minute, as Dr. Manish Kumar is unable to make it. Today, I'm happy to be discussing with you the role philanthropists and social investors can play in supporting government efforts to help the workforce reinvent, reskill, upskill, and even multi-skill to take advantage of emerging opportunities in the rapidly evolving market. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us again.
Yeah, thank you for giving me this opportunity. Thanks a lot.
So let me get started. So South Asia is home to the largest number of youth in the world, right? Almost half of its 1.8 billion population is under the age of 24. However, according to research published by the Global Business Coalition for Education and Education Commission in 2019, less than half of the region's youth has the basic skills required to join the workforce in 2030. At the same time, despite efforts to universalize primary education, there were still about 18 million children who were out of school in South Asia. And this, of course, makes efforts to skill youth for the workplace even more challenging. And I'm giving you all these figures, and these are all pre-pandemic figures. Since then, of course, we know the landscape has changed significantly, and school and university closures have further impeded the education and skill development of the youth. Mr. Pillai, can you give us a sense of where the impact of the pandemic has been most keenly felt in the Indian labor market and how this has shifted NSDC's work and organizational priorities?
So let me begin by saying that the pandemic has, in a sense, disrupted the entire skill development ecosystem. None of our training centers open till probably 2 months back, and the entire skill development activities, all of them had come to a halt. It's only in the last few weeks we have started again some of the centers opening and few trainings have begun. So clearly, it has been a very difficult time for the sector. Uh, Obviously, it stems from the fact that the entire economy itself is at a standstill. But there are few sectors which we have seen over the last 6 to 7 months. There is a demand, and there has been a substantial increase in number of people getting employed in these sectors. And these are obvious to many people: healthcare, e-commerce, logistics. These being the key areas where there has been significant uptick in employment. Uh, that that's the number one thing. Number two is we saw a significant migration happening at that point in time between April to October. That phase we saw significant migration. We saw a lot of people moving out of jobs, going back to the villages. So the question was, what do we do with these people? Because local employment was a challenge. And skilling itself takes at least 10 to 15 days of minimum kind of skilling effort, and we needed something to quickly to happen. And that's when one of our key portals, that is ASEEM, which is used for connecting workforce to jobs, that got into action. And I'm happy to say during this period, substantial number of people, many of those who had gone back to villages, be able to put them back into jobs in other sectors. Some of it required reskilling in the sense, not to the extent, it's a short period of reskilling. And the government also substantiated with with a scheme called Garib Rozgar Kalyan Yojana, where a number of district administrations, they were able to identify these youth, provide them this with those minimal amount of skilling, and put them back into some kind of jobs or opportunities. On the international front, also we saw a substantial number of people coming back, and there also we introduced something called Swadesh. So at every airport we had this. When every worker would come back, or a person comes back, then there was the skill card which was made, where everybody detailed what their skill was, what their last job was. Again, we use the portal to connect them to potential job opportunities within the country. So these are some of the efforts during the pandemic. So these were like difficult days, but now that in a sense we have gone through that, the government's new scheme PMK 2.0 has been relaunched. So their training has begun. But then there's the big positive side we saw during this phase, which I think we would have to speak about a lot in the coming days, is the digital piece of skilling. Prior to the pandemic, it was like we used to push the agenda for digital skilling, but there are very few takers, both from the trainee side and also the training partner side and also the employer side. But during this phase, we saw that many of our training partners, in order to survive, they began to offer models, and we supported them through our own platform called eSkill India platform. So if you go to the platform today, you have close to 700 courses, of which 70% are free. And these courses are offered by all our partners like Microsoft, IBM, Sailor Academy, etc. So many of these training partners use these programs, etc., to train people. And we hope, and so the idea of training, getting people skilled through a digital model, it started taking roots. And so we now sit at that point. It's like an inflection point for us also, since we are ourselves a decade old now, where we need to see how do we use the fact that there is a momentum created for digital skilling. How do we blend it with the physical model we have and take it forward? So it's actually very interesting times going forward.
Absolutely. And the complexity that you speak to, I mean, it's amazing the types and levels of work that you have undertaken. And actually, that leads me quite well into the next question on the different skills required by different strata of society. The needs of the young person joining the workforce for the first time, for example, versus the needs of somebody more mature whom you've just referred to as needing reskilling or upskilling. And then we talk about the different color codes that you colloquially use to differentiate different types of work. A blue collar worker, white collar, some people now say gray collar, pink collar, gold collar. And how do you prioritize in this system amongst these various groups? And where do you see the most urgent needs? You mentioned something about merging the digital landscape with the physical activities.
So broadly, if you see, there are three groups, where skilling is required. The first is what is called as not in employment, education, and training, the NEET segment. This is the youth who are school dropouts or school pass outs without any employment opportunities, who are just idling away the time kind of thing. This is a big chunk. This is when we started in 2009, this was around 20 crores. That's the kind of the number of people who are in this category. And it's so high. I mean, other countries' populations may not even match up to this, but we had 20 crore youth sitting in this category. And over the last 10 years, this has fallen down. And maybe today it's around 13 to 14 crores. So still we have a significant population. Please keep in mind that while this is what we call as a stock, in the sense we have these 13 crore people who are not in employment, education, and training. Now, to this stock, every year we add people. In the sense, we have a crore of people coming into the workforce, people who cross 15 years of age. And if you add up all the training, educational facilities in the country, that works to roughly around 40 lakhs, 30 to 40 lakhs. So we have a close to 60 to 70 lakh people coming in who don't have any opportunity to go up in higher education. So imagine, try to understand the dynamics. 13 crore people who are a stock, and every year we're adding 60 to 70 lakhs to that. Yeah. So that is the first segment we need to cater to. The second segment is skilling in the education itself, that is schools and colleges. So the students who come out of a colleges, you know very well how they have low employability. In the sense, they cannot be hired by corporate and put immediately on jobs. So they need to be provided those last mile skills which will enable them to get into jobs. And also now, if you look at the new education policy, then the focus is on how do you vocationalize at the school level itself. So that, say tomorrow you finish your 10th standard, 10th grade, and God forbid you are not able to go forward to learn, go for a higher learning, you have a skill to earn a livelihood for yourself. So that's the whole area of skilling in education. The third area is which you spoke of is the skilling of the existing workforce. And that also falls into two broad categories. One is the informal workforce, the other is the formal workforce. When we say informal, are those who do not work in organized factories or organized companies, etc., whether the contract is not, it's very casual contracts or various other forms of employment which is not, minimum wages are not adhered to, and so many other things. So we have a huge informal population, informal workforce. And to that, we have something called a recognition of prior learning. What that means is that you may not have a certificate, but you have a skill. So we recognize that skill. So we assess you first, and we recognize you for that skill. So that's the element of workforce. And the last one is, of course, the organized workforce. You know what changes are happening in the economy. You see that we speak a lot about technology, bringing in a lot of changes in the nature of work, jobs, etc. So obviously that requires a huge reskilling element. So these are the three broad categories we need to look at. One is those in the not in education, employment, training category. The second is those in the education system, which is more like the employability skills. And third is the workforce. Now to each of these category, we work the focus has been largely on the first category. So if you see this category was, the other two are, there are ways to, there have been models where, people have trained these people, provided last mile skills, etc. But the first category and the RPL, that is those in the informal, the areas where very little skilling has happened. And that's where what work we have been doing for the last 10 years. So today we have a network of 6 training partners, training companies, which work in this sector. So in the last 10 years, we have trained roughly around, through the NSDC ecosystem, roughly around 3 crore people. And this all comes under the National Skills Qualification Framework. So through that, the larger, maybe around 6 to 7 crore people have been trained in this fashion. But there's still a long way to go.
Yes, I mean, the scale of the need is phenomenal. And as you mentioned, it may be larger than many populations themselves. Moving now from the supply side to the demand side of the conversation. It was interesting for me to learn that NSDC was set up as a public-private partnership. Now, what has this model allowed you to achieve in terms of the skilling programs and job matching? Can you speak to some of the different partnerships models? You alluded to some a little bit earlier, Microsoft, Schneider, and so on.
Okay. You can, if you look at it, we have been having the vocational training ecosystem in this country probably from the 1960s. The ITIs, the Industrial Training Institute. So the public training system has always been there. It is in 2009 when we realized that what I spoke to you, this gap between the number of people to be trained and the number of facilities, the amount of facilities was so big and it was widening. And we had this demographic window which you keep speaking of. So we have we had say 20 to 30 years time in which to bridge the gap. The only way that could have been done is through some form of accelerated skilling or rapid skilling. That is where this short-term training comes, short-term skilling comes, and that's where industry is. Now, please understand, short-term skilling, we are not saying in a 3-month time frame. In a 3-month time frame, somebody is fully skilled. It's the case of somebody being skilled, or rather you could call him semi-skilled or something. So the question was, how do we define all this? And that's where this, what I just spoke to you of, the National Skills Qualification Framework comes in. Levels of competencies were defined. So you're no longer, you're called a welder, you're called a level 3 welder, a level 4 welder, a level 5 electrician. Now, how do we develop this competency? That's where the industry comes in, because the government doesn't have any sense or any idea of the competency level required for these states. And that's where the industry comes in. And that's where the first form of public-private partnership, besides we being a public-private PPP venture, is the Sector Skill Council. So you see every one of these sectors, 37 sectors, they have a Sector Skill Council. And each of these Sector Skill Councils, they have developed the standards, and all the standards have been developed with the industry help. So that's where it is a PPP is so important, that the whole thing is focused on training people to these standards. And these Sector Skill Councils then assess and certify, help in apprenticeship and placements. So the first level of PPP is this whole creating of the entire framework through a PPP. Post that, what we have seen is that the principal funding mechanism in this area is been the government's funding mechanism. So there are 3 kinds of funding. One, the government funds. The second is the trainee pays. And third is CSR. So there's a lot of corporate social responsibility funds which flow into the sector. And these are used for youth and placing. So there is the other area where PPP comes in. So our own assessment is that, the third area is creating these capacities. I spoke to you about these 600 companies. We have invested roughly around 1,500 crores in the form of loans, soft loans. But the private sector, through their own equity investments, have brought roughly around 4,000 crores into the market. So again, it's a PPP kind of thing when it comes to some form of funding in the sector also. So standard creation, funding, then there's a whole element of training of trainers. So the industry supports the whole thing with providing those kind of setups and establishments or facilities for training of trainers. And the last and most important thing is on the apprenticeship side. So you see, this short-term skilling cannot become really of value to a company unless it is supported with some kind of on-the-job training or apprenticeship. And that's where the private sector again comes in. They pick up this boy or girl who is say undergone a 3-month program. They put them through their own system for the next 2 to 3 months. And that's when we can say that this trainee is truly skilled enough to do a job. So all these across the value chain, right from training of trainers, creating standards, placement, apprenticeship, everywhere the industry is in. I don't think there can be a better PPP model than this in the development sector than skill development. And speaking of examples, you just spoke of on the content side, you see Microsoft coming in, providing content free. We see Schneider coming in, providing their own infrastructure, using their CSR funds to set up this. But now slowly it's becoming, and that's where, and if you allow me another few minutes, I could speak now how impact investors are also stepping into this space. Impact investors also stepping into space. So it's a good space now in terms of in that ways in both parties could contribute, and it's essential that both countries contribute. Otherwise, this thing will not go forward.
Absolutely. And actually, that was my next question about how private philanthropy and impact investing could support your efforts.
Okay. Good, I mean, good. It led to that question. So the what see the point was over the last 10 years. I keep repeating because many other systems like the education and the vocational are close to 50, 60 years old. This is a very young system. It's just a 10-year-old system. So what has the government done right using large parts of its fund is to create the institutional mechanism for the system. So we have NSDC, which is the nodal agency. We have the sector skill councils. We have a ministry. We have a regulator in the form of National Council for Vocational Education Training. Every state has a body called State Skill Development Mission. So all the institutional structure is in place, and there is some the performance. If you see, as I mentioned, roughly around 4 to 6 to 7 crore people have been trained. So we have something in place. In the last 10 years, we have put this all up, and there is this model of you could say in water highly efficient, less efficient, but this public-private partnership model also. But we have reached an inflection point, as I told you, and that is where we need to accelerate. If we continue in this fashion, we'll never be able to achieve our targets. Targets in the sense to skill maybe 30, 40 crore Indians in the next 10, 15 years. It is very challenging if we continue in this form. Two things are required. One is uh, capital, the other is technology. And when it comes to capital, as I told you, the primary heavy lifting has been done by the government. And that's where we could look at the private sector to contribute. Now, what does the private sector look for when they put their capital? At least in this space, they look for outcomes. Now, if you look at it, the outcomes currently, there is a lot desired in the way it's currently happening when it comes to the placements happening, when it comes to retention of people in jobs, etc. Obviously, this requires much more than, I mean, more a better design of the various programs, etc. And also various kinds of funds coming into it, various kinds of capital coming. So what we are doing right now is, I give you an example. We are launching what is called as India's first skill impact bond. Now, what does this bond do? If the bond is not trying to replace what the government is doing, the private sector can never replace what the government is doing, because the government is the only institution or the setup which has got the capacity to operate at scale. But what private sector capital can do can actually direct that investments into better outcomes. And that's what we are doing through the skill impact bond. The bond intends to train 30,000 people. So what's great about it? Well, the government has been training millions, right? The point is, we are saying that the current model has a certain level of efficiency, and the bond is entirely outcome driven. So it says that we will provide funds only when you achieve certain levels in placement, in retention, etc., etc., and only then payouts will happen. And the payouts are significantly higher. It's loaded in terms of performance. So in this bond, we and Michael Susan Dell Foundation are coming as risk investors. HSBC Foundation, the Jindal Steelworks Foundation, and Children Investment Fund Foundation, they are coming as outcome funders. And Dubai Cares, four of them coming. This is a 130 crore bond. And the idea is that we will achieve these higher efficiencies and higher outcomes. And eventually, the learnings from this would then be mainstreamed in the larger ecosystem. Similarly, the other product which you're working again with a set of impact investors, in this case, the Badhani Foundation and MSDF again, is what's called a skill loan with guarantee facility. We are saying that the big challenge in this sector is it's very difficult to give loans. So the non-banking financial institutions, they don't want to give loans because they simply don't have the data in terms of what is the risk in this sector. So again, we are stepping in along with the impact investors and trying to create a guarantee facility. The sense in case there is a loss, the first loss is guaranteed. And then we are creating this product. Again, this product is focused on close to 30, 40,000 people getting loans over the next 3 to 4 years. Third is we are looking at some kind of fund, a grant fund of a scale in which it's like a fund which would be registered with the SEBI and things like that, where we would raise funds for this sector. Similarly, we are also looking at various ways in which impact investors and rather we are trying to create products and vehicles through which the impact investors and the CSR funds can enter the sector.
Well, that's fascinating. And indeed, it demonstrates the need of a whole of India approach to create the change that you would like to see. It has been 10 years that NSDC has been in operation. In your time there, have you seen any collaboration that you think demonstrates the sort of systems level change and impact that you have talked about these bonds and new products achieving?
So this, as I told you, the the government, you can't expect innovation on the government side because the government is more on the kind of, they support the existing programs, trying to build on them kind of thing. The big innovation typically comes from the private sector. And many of our, what you see today, our training partners are all private companies. And if you look at it, they with the if you look at the entire value chain, right, from mobilization of a trainee till the placement of it, the big innovations have come through use of technology. So I see technology as an area where uh, uh, I mean, a number of such partners which you just spoke of, technology partners coming in. I see not only technology in the learning space, but also technology in the non-learning elements of the space, like placement, job matching, etc. So going forward, I think this is an area where significant private sector involvement, participation would happen, or is expected to happen as this space begins to mature. So we have done the initial seeding job. We have put up all this. The companies have come up. The trainees are. We see that it works to some extent, etc. But to improve the outcomes, etc., technology has to. So therefore, we are one of the big areas we are working is to create a big skill platform where private sector and the public sector come in together and are able to achieve higher outcomes using the skills platform. So that's an area I think is an area which is developing and probably going forward. The second is, of course, the various learning, the way learning itself is delivered. Um, I don't see the next 5 years this pure physical model anyway happening. It has to be blended. So today we have a training center which has a capacity of say 20 to 25 people per batch, and offering training over three months, etc. Tomorrow, maybe using digital technology, we can increase the capacity substantially, maybe reduce the number of class hour times, the center-based training, etc. So the use of technology in learning would also significantly change the way the whole sector is evolving. Uh, so these are some of the areas I think we are calling for. We call for partners and a lot of other partnerships which are stitching up also along these lines.
Fascinating. Thank you so much, Mr. Pillai. This has been an immensely enriching session for me, and I'm sure many in the audience also feel the same. So, as a closing comment, maybe you can tell us, for somebody who now wants to come to you tomorrow to start doing something to support your work, what would you say? Where do they start?
Oh, as I told you, this is uh, if you're talking of impact investors, if you're that's funding side, if you're talking of expertise, if you're talking of providing some kind of apprenticeship job opportunities, if you're talking of people providing voluntary service in the form of providing some trainings, this sector is the sector, because you could do so much in this sector. And the fact that uh, there is the impact the sector can do, in terms of the impact this sector can do in terms of changing lives of youth across the country. I don't think there is any bigger sector than this. So when I clearly, when I look at corporates, the first thing is, you last year I think around 1700 crores was the CSR funds went to skilling, or maybe it's very low down in their own set of priorities when it comes to skilling. So I would urge some of the corporates to look at the skilling sector, see if considering the impact the sector has potential. Please look at whether CSR, more and more CSR funds can be uh, actually be used in the sector. So, and NSDC is very keen. We would help work with you to create such programs or projects which are to your which meets your own CSR requirements. So that's one. Second is impact investors. I would like them to help us as NSDC. We would like to partner with them to bring about the innovations required, because impact investors, you typically, we look at them as somebody who we can work with them, who have patient capital, they're willing to wait. It's not that they're looking for immediate returns, and they also are looking for higher outcomes. So we look at impact investor partners again to work with us jointly, bring to us the catalytic funding that you guys bring to the each sector. So we look at that. When it comes to industry, the best way an industry can support is by providing apprenticeships and placements. Even if you can't provide jobs, even the sector can provide kind of apprenticeships. It will help a whole lot of youth in the country, because they will then be exposed at least to the what exactly it means to be actually skilled and to be on a job. When it comes to trainers, this sector is a huge shortage of trainers. I mean, the quality of any system is equivalent to the level of the quality of the trainers. And our trainers, we are not saying that. I think many of us can also support this, in the sense we understand we are also talking of general, even the professionals in the country. It's possible that they can provide some of their time for training, work with our training centers, provide some kind of support for training, etc. So there is a whole lot of activities within the skill space, which requires significant investments, significant investment both in time and capital. And I would urge each one of these private sector players to participate in that.
Thank you so much. There's certainly so much that we can do and do together as well. With that, we have now come to the end of the Fireside Chat, Thriving After COVID-19, Reskilling the Workforce and the Role of Social Investors. Thank you again, Mr. Pillay.
Thank you very much.
Chief Strategy Officer of the National Skill Development Corporation, for coming on board to share your insights with us today. We're so grateful to have you here. This session is made possible with the kind support of our festival partners, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, Sesame Workshop India, the Rockefeller Foundation, #COVID Action Collab, VNV Advisory Services LLP, the British Asian Trust, WPP India CSR Foundation, Catalyst Management Services Private Limited, and SATVA. To continue chatting with your speakers and fellow delegates in the session, please make full use of the messaging and meeting function on our festival platform. Do remember to share your highlights of the session on social media, and remember to tag us using the hashtags AVPN South Asia 2021 and Social Impact. Up next, the session on building economic resilience for vulnerable populations will be starting in about 3 minutes' time. Thank you, and please enjoy the rest of the festival.